Louise Edwards. I'm from University of South Wales and I'm head of Enterprise Education Hub. The likelihood is that most of you in this room won't have heard of the University of South Wales. And the reason being is because we've only been in existence for the past month. I've worked for the past 14 years for University of Glamorgan, and we've recently merged with a local university, which is University of Wales Newport. So we've now formed University of South Wales, and we were merged on the 11th of April. So still very new. I'm still getting used to saying that I work for University of South Wales and not University of Glamorgan. But obviously a lot of what I'm going to speak about today is based on my experiences at Glamorgan. I have to say, when this talk of merger is often followed by sort of negative comments. But I have to say, in terms of our enterprise agenda, in reality, we merged our activities long before our university merged. So some of what I'm going to talk about today is how we've worked in collaboration with other universities within Wales, and all for the purpose of promoting entrepreneurship and getting students to be more entrepreneurial. So, some very brief statistics as to our new university. We have 5 campuses, just over 33,000 students. Majority of those are undergraduate. Most of our students come from all over Wales. Don't get many Scottish or Irish students. So that's a breakdown for you. Before we merged, we had around about 26,000 students. What brings me to Newfoundland is I've been involved in a project called Tradewinds, and this project is just about coming to an end. Different components to it. The 2 main components is the student exchange. So we have hosted some of your students at home with us. They studied a semester with us in Wales. And likewise, we sent some of our students over to Memorial, where they studied with you. They've all come back. They've all had a very positive experience. They've all picked up on the local twang. So we've now got students with Canadian accents. And we're now moving into the latter part of this project, which is the academic exchange. So that's what brings me to Memorial. And basically, it's to share ideas, look at whether there's any possible routes for collaboration, be that research, projects, future teaching, etc. And we will also be hosting one of Memorial's academic members of staff when he comes to join us the end of next week. So, I have to say, very thankful to yourselves for taking an interest in some of the work that I've done and inviting me to come along and talk to you today. I'll give you a brief background to myself. I'm based in the Faculty of Business and Society. Been there in higher education for 14 years. So I teach and research in the field of enterprise education. But in my role as head of the Enterprise Education Hub, that's primarily to steer enterprise across all campuses. So that's from academic staff through to students, to make sure that the student enterprise agenda is well covered, ensure that students know where they can go if they've got a business idea they want to get mentoring for or funding for. And we're also there to support those students that maybe are not interested in starting a business, but are interested in becoming sort of more entrepreneurial or more employable. We have a Centre for Enterprise, and that Centre for Enterprise is made up of 3 hubs. So we have a hub for female entrepreneurship. They've just gained a new contract, which was worth £4.4 million, which is a 3-year project. So within that, they're going to be developing entrepreneurship courses for women. And they're also doing some research into the gender pay gap. We've also got a social enterprise hub, and the person looking after that hub is very much policy driven. And then we've got the Enterprise Education Hub, which I've mentioned I look after. So in the 14 years that I've been at Glamorgan, started off looking after what was a research project called the Wales Fast Growth 50. And the premise behind this project is that we wanted to measure and sort of rank small businesses in Wales and see how they were faring, how they would compare year on year. So that started off as very much a research project, and that's developed over the past 14 years. There's a person called Professor Dylan Jones-Evans whose idea it was to do this project. And wherever Dylan moves in Wales, the project follows him. So it's now at the stage where lots of small businesses in Wales are seeing this project as a very good advertising tool for their business. So they're using it to say, you know, we're ranked 4th in Wales, fastest growing business, etc. So lots of different reasons for companies wanting to get involved in that project. Then went on to manage the Enterprise and Education Initiative. This was funded with European money, and it was the first time that really enterprise education had been looked at within a Welsh context, within university. And in terms of areas of best practice, I must admit I was looking more towards America, looking at what some of the initiatives that were running there, trying to take areas of best practice and develop it in Glamorgan. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but I'm going to come back to some of those initiatives in a little while. I then went on to manage and lecture on the Masters in Entrepreneurship course for female entrepreneurs. This was very much a course for entrepreneurship rather than being about entrepreneurship, meaning that the women that came on this course had to have a business idea. So as well as us being there to provide academic support, we were also there to provide mentoring support. So at the end of that 18-month program, the women should have been leaving with a qualification, so a certificate to say that they've got a master's degree in entrepreneurship, but also that their business was there ready to launch on that day of graduation. Then became what was known as an enterprise champion around about 2004, and I will talk about that in a bit more depth as well. And then that leads me to my current role, as I've mentioned, as head of Enterprise Education Hub. So, in terms of the topic, are universities creating entrepreneurs or just ticking boxes? It is Wales that I'm going to use as the case study for this. That's our map of Wales. In terms of our newly merged institution, our campuses cover these areas here. But in terms of support for entrepreneurship, obviously we're talking about Wales as a whole. So I need to tell you a little bit about the history of Wales and how we got onto this enterprise bandwagon. And back in around about the year 2000, well, I suppose we can go back further than that. Traditionally, Wales was a country of mines, manufacturing, etc. And huge demise when mines closed, mass unemployment. And around about year 2000, Wales was given European money, which was to regenerate the country. And whilst there was lots of joy that we were going to get this money, if you strip away from that and look at the reasons that we were getting the money, that money was actually only given to the most deprived regions. So it's not the best thing when you think that we're getting this money because we're classed as a deprived region. But anyway, back in those days we had something called the Welsh Development Agency, and they very much looked towards entrepreneurship as a means of bringing the economy back on track. And they very much seen that universities were the way to do this. And they were looking to universities as being the catalyst to develop entrepreneurs, develop businesses, and of course in turn to develop new jobs. So one of the first things that they did is they commissioned something called the Entrepreneurship Action Plan for Wales. And this is the first time that an entrepreneurship action plan existed within Europe. And it was actually my university, University of Glamorgan, which won the contract to develop this action plan. And what they actually started doing, so I'm going to go back a few slides. When I was managing the Enterprise and Education Initiative, this was the same time that they gained the contract to develop the Entrepreneurship Action Plan. And what they started to do was to look at some of the things that I was developing with these initiatives, looking at some of the work that I'd been looking at in America, and then started developing an action plan around that, which is all very much geared towards enterprise in education. So some of the policies that came out of that, well, the Entrepreneurship Action Plan originally existed to provide advice, guidance, etc. And out of that action plan, Welsh Government then put together a number of policies. And these were policies that affected the whole of Wales. So the first thing that they did is they had a pot of funding and they launched a scheme called Enterprise Champions. And what they did is they funded a person to work in every university and every further education college, that would be the equivalent of your community college, with an enterprise champion. Now, in some institutions, that meant recruiting a new person to the job, so somebody who had experience of working in businesses, etc. In some institutions, it was taking some of those entrepreneurship staff that already existed and developing a new role for them. But the job of that enterprise champion was to do exactly what it says, to champion entrepreneurship. So go out across campus, change mindsets, work with staff, get staff to engage with entrepreneurship, bring it into the curriculum, encourage them to enable students to change the mindset, encourage them to understand that when they leave university, they can create their own job. They don't have to start work for somebody else. What we were also finding at this time is that a lot of our graduates were finishing university and they had no jobs to go to. So in terms of jobs, they were actually going to London, particularly all of our design students. So we were losing really good quality graduates to other countries. So we needed to find a way to try and retain these good people in Wales to create jobs and create businesses. So you had the enterprise champion role. The next thing that Welsh Government did is they provided funding for us to redevelop our curriculum. This varied depending on different universities. What we did at Glamorgan is that we developed a module which ran for about 10 weeks, and we called that module Starting a New Enterprise. And it was very much a module or course about entrepreneurship. That course was taught to every student, every first year student right across campus. So it was all about creating awareness of entrepreneurship, etc. We then found that the students wanted more than that. They didn't just want to know how to start a business, they want to know how to develop one as well. So we then used that money to develop another course for our second year students, which was called Developing a New Enterprise. And then we found our third year students were asking for the same thing. So we then provided another course for them called Growing a New Enterprise. So that was our accredited curriculum. At the same time, we were also running a number of master's courses in entrepreneurship, as well as undergraduate. We have partner colleges in Germany and France, and they quite liked these modules that we were running. So we also created an international delivery team, and they would go to France and Germany 3 times a year to deliver this module to their students. What our partner colleges found is that they liked, the students liked to engage in a business type course through the medium of English. And of course, that also brought some income to our university as well. So that's the accredited side of it. In terms of extracurricular, we started developing things like enterprise clubs, networking events, started providing mentoring for students, workshops for students. Everything was demand-led. So we were listening to the students, finding out what they wanted and meeting their demands. But of course, we had the money to do this. We had money from Welsh Government to do it. We also developed something called the Enterprise Educators Network. So what Welsh Government did with this policy is they brought together all of the enterprise champions right across Wales. So it would have been around 35 of them, and we created a network. So when I talked about mergers, in terms of enterprise education, that merger started over 10 years ago. So you have an enterprise champion in every university coming together, sharing ideas, talking about what works well in their university, what doesn't work well. It opens up the doors for so many opportunities to collaborate on research, teaching, projects, etc. What it means for the student is that they can access enterprise support services in any university. So even though they might be a student of mine at University of Glamorgan, they may live, or parents may live in North Wales. So when they go home to their parents at the summer, they can access enterprise support services at that local university. So it's opened up the network right across Wales. Research, what we actually found at that time is that a lot of the research being conducted into enterprise education was very much of a quantitative, had very much a quantitative background. And what we started doing was going more down the qualitative route. And we were measuring things like student self-efficacy, measuring the intentions to start a business, how realistic would it be that they'd start a business? Could you spot entrepreneurs? And then we then started looking at something called educating the educator. And again, each of these are policies from Welsh Government. And Welsh Government very much seen that although universities were the catalyst to business startup, we had to actually start engaging with people much earlier. So Welsh Government actually came out with a number of curriculum resources which could be used from age 3 through to age 21. So in terms of educating the educator, we also had to do quite a lot of work with primary school teachers. So looking at how they engage with students, what pedagogies they use, but also look at the mindset. What were they actually telling students about entrepreneurship and business startup? Were they promoting it as a positive thing? Or, were they actually telling students, you can create your own job, you can do these things? So educating the educator is still something that's we're working on at the moment. We still haven't got that quite right. So those are some of the enterprise education policies that were developed. One of the other things that came out was something called Dynamo role models. And what Welsh Government did was identify entrepreneurs in Wales, and they would bring them into the classroom. And again, this could be from age 3 through to 21, and those entrepreneurs could share their experiences with students. And in the very early days of this program, what we found, or certainly what the students were telling us, was that the entrepreneur was too far removed from them. So what Welsh Government had identified as entrepreneurs were what we would call pedestal entrepreneurs. So they'd come into the university, they were serial entrepreneurs, they'd done all these great things, and students found it really difficult to engage with that. So we then had to start looking for more local entrepreneurs, something that students could aspire to, but in small little steps. So Welsh Government did that. We've got a wide range of businesses supported through the role model programme. So we've got everything from web designers to manufacturers of Welsh whisky. and everything in between. We've got our serial entrepreneurs, everything. We've also, the scheme's also identified maybe what we would call our hidden entrepreneurs. So for example, within walking distance to our university is a sweet shop. It's very pretty, it's pink, we walk past it every day, and Welsh Government said that they'd identified the owner of that shop as an entrepreneur. And we all said, he's a sweet shop, what does he know about entrepreneurship? Anyone can sell sweets. We've got students on campus selling with a tuck shop. But what we didn't know is that that sweet shop that we walked past every day, and that person that sold us sweets every day, actually owned all 15 buildings on that row. And what he actually has is the bottom level of those premises are all office space or restaurants, etc., that he rents out. And above that is all student accommodation. So he was an entrepreneur on our doorstep, and obviously we hadn't given him the recognition that he deserved. And he's been a really, really good ambassador for our students, does quite a lot of work with us. And that's been really important for networking. We also bring those entrepreneurs in to act as judges and advisors. But another thing that our students identified is that a lot of the entrepreneurs that we were bringing in would start their presentation by saying, I left school age 14 and now I'm running this business and I'm turning over X amount of money. And the first thing our students would say to us is, why am I spending time in university? Why am I here for 3 years studying if this person has gone off and done it at age 14? So we needed to address that. So Welsh Government did another campaign to find maybe what we would call educated entrepreneurs, but I use that term quite loosely. But obviously we did need to find those entrepreneurs that had been through a university experience and could talk about the steps and what they did after graduation. This is something that I was very heavily involved in, which was called the Knowledge Exploitation Fund, otherwise known as KEF. And it is what it is, exploitation of knowledge. And this goes back to Welsh Government identifying that we were losing lots of our good graduates to other countries. So they came up with a fund that would be managed and housed within universities. And it was for funding for graduates to start a business. But the business that they started up had to be in relation to the degree that they'd studied. So it was all about exploiting your knowledge, all about everything you've learned in those 3 years, how can you now exploit it and start that business. The criteria was quite varied, and Welsh Government maintained that it was based on growth, but they measured growth in terms of number of jobs created. It wasn't necessarily measured in terms of turnover. So each of those new entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs that came onto this program, they had to show in their business plan that there was potential to grow the business through employing staff. And they had to show that they were able to do that within 9 months of starting the business. In terms of funding, it was more or less what I would call a living allowance that these students were given. So it was £144 over 46 weeks. They also had a £500 travel budget, and they could have a £1,000 budget to cover sort of dependent costs if they had elderly relatives or young children to look after. And that's very much when I seen my role change from that to an academic to that more of a prac-ademic, meaning that the students that were coming in looking for business advice, they didn't want the academic side of it. What they needed was a friend. They needed somebody to hold their hand. They didn't want, or they wasn't ready to go and seek business support themselves. They needed an introduction to it. They needed to build their confidence. So this actually took up quite a lot of my time. And it meant that I was then working with students, the ones that were coming through the door with 101 ideas, and then you try and get down to what the idea really is, and then working with those ones who come in with that absolute definite idea and, you know, wanting to start the business within something crazy like 3 weeks. But some of them did do it. What that meant for University of Glamorgan is that we had 83 graduates who started a business. That was over an 18-month period. We were certainly the highest achieving university, and I do think that's because we totally engaged with being the prac-ademic. We really had to make that cultural shift from being the academic to the absolute support person. So out of those jobs, managed to fund over £400,000 for them. It was a minimum of 250 jobs created. At least 9 of those entrepreneurs have gone on to start new businesses. All of them are growing companies. 76 of them still exist today, so that's sort of 10 plus years later. One of our entrepreneurs, he employs at the moment, I think it's 16 staff, but he will only employ staff who are graduates of University of Glamorgan. That's just something he's put in place. But what that's also given us is a really good link with our entrepreneurship alumni. So our alumni office in general was quite weak, but in terms of us being able to maintain our own contacts with our entrepreneurship alumni, it's been great because we've been able to bring those people in as guest lecturers, guest entrepreneurs, etc. So it's been really good for us to maintain that network. I've mentioned the educated entrepreneur. Some of our graduates were coming back to us. Some of our graduates are coming back to us and saying, you know, where is the support after startup? Although there's plenty of support there in the beginning, where is the support after that? And that they're expected to grow their businesses, but where are the mentors to enable them to start doing that? And I guess essentially we have to address who should address this. I know I'm short on time, so I'm going to skip through this. I will say that since the Entrepreneurship Action Plan has been developed, we've now got something called the Youth Entrepreneurship Strategy, which is split into 3 areas. So it's all about engaging students in entrepreneurship, empowering them and equipping them. And I've actually found that that's a really good measurement tool. So whether you're running an entrepreneurship class, whether you're running a project, it's a really good measurement to work out what are you actually giving your clients. Are you engaging them with entrepreneurship? Are you telling them about it? Are you empowering them to do it? Or actually, are you equipping them? And I have to say, in terms of returning to the topic of this talk, I think we're actually very weak on this side here. I think we're, certainly universities in Wales at the moment, is more on the engaging and empowering side. So I will leave these slides for you to look at, because I am being reminded that I'm short on time. These few slides here are basically where Welsh Government policy is now. So there's 2 bursaries available. There's 1 bursary available for 16 to 24-year-olds, and there's also a graduate bursary. What Welsh Government has done is, in some ways, they haven't listened to our past students. So, for example, if you see there, there's £6,000 paid over a 6-month period. Our graduate entrepreneurs are telling us that that wouldn't have worked for them. What they wanted was payments to be made in stages. So you start off with a higher amount and work down from that. But for some reason, Welsh Government haven't taken note of that. The other situation that we're in is where I used to provide business mentoring, business support. Legally, I'm no longer allowed to do that. Universities were getting a little bit worried about what would happen if we give the wrong information, would a student come back and sue the university in time? So what Welsh Government now has is a range of business mentors. Again, they're a little bit too far removed from the students because they still need somebody to hold their hand. But we've addressed that by bringing those mentors onto campus and basically having an open door policy. So I have something called Ideas Factories on every campuses, and I bring in a business mentor, and they are there every Wednesday afternoon and every Thursday morning, so any student can go in and discuss their business idea. So that leads us basically to the end of the presentation. So are universities creating entrepreneurs or just ticking boxes? Personally, I think we are creating entrepreneurs, but we're not doing enough to support them after startup. So what we're not doing is measuring how many of those students are still running businesses 3 years, 5 years down the line. Lots of the investment is put into the startup stage, but not sustainability, and we're not monitoring those students. But then I guess that leads us to possibly a discussion for us now is, do universities in effect really have a role in engaging, empowering and equipping graduates for entrepreneurship? Should it be the case that they come to us for the 3 years, they have their education, to those graduates? So I think that brings us within time. There's my contact details if you would like to contact me. I'm around for the rest of the session, and I do